How was Helen Watermelon?
What?
How was Helen Watermelon? Oh.
Helen was so fun and her family, Satino. All right, welcome, chapter 15, A Time to Mourn, Traditions of Death, Grief, and Healing. So we'll go through the text and I'll share a little bit about my experience and we'll go from there. Judaism as well, right? So the death and bereavement. Judaism does well, and I think it has a good reputation, right? Right, this we do well, you know, so we'll learn a little bit about what we do, what it means, what the halachic path, the legal path of Jewish mourning, right, so it's somewhere on borderlines custom and law, depending on where you sit and what your perspective is. And so we can talk a little bit about that, right? Is this a legal tradition or is this a helpful therapeutic tradition? But here we go. Judaism teaches us to approach life's hardest moments with compassion and community. So those are the two driving forces when it comes to Judaism's approach. Compassion, allowing the mourner to mourn, allowing the body to rest. Compassion. And then community. Oftentimes, mourning can be a very isolating experience. And so Judaism wants to be sure to keep us connected to community. In this class, we'll explore the sacred practices that will help us navigate grief and heartache and move from sadness to renewed life. Helps move from one emotional state to another through the Jewish journey. So let's start here. Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. Right? So this is one of the important mitzvot that we have, right? So before end of life, there's sickness and illness. And so let's start there. In the illness phase, we are taught that we need to go visit people who are sick. If we hear that someone's sick, send a text, go visit, right? Even when COVID was happening, it makes things a little easier. So call, right? A call or text or Zoom. Zoom, right? Now we can Zoom people who are sick. Oh my God, right? So we can be there and show our faces and be together. So that's the major Jewish imperative in terms of dealing with illness. Visit each other. Why? Rabbi Chia bar Abba fell ill. And Rabbi Yochanan went to visit him. And he asked, do you want your suffering? Right? Is this something that, larger context here, there are, in the rabbinic mindset, some suffering is okay, but other suffering isn't. The suffering that's okay is suffering that we can rebound from. It's suffering that challenges us to rise. That's beloved suffering in some rabbinic terms. If we don't know pain, we'll never know joy. If we don't know loss, we don't appreciate things, right? There's lots of reasons why one can embrace suffering. So the question was, is this a suffering you're embracing or not so much? And he said, no, this is not suffering that I want or need. Neither my suffering nor its reward. Like I don't want the suffering, and I don't want no pain, no gain, right? And I don't want the gain either. He said to him, okay, give me your hand. He did, and he raised him up to health, and it worked. He didn't want his suffering. He wanted to get rid of it, and the visit from the rabbi helped. Rabbi Yochanan fell ill, and Rabbi Hanina went to go visit him. Right, so the healer became sick. Rabbi Yochanan, who healed Rabbi Chia, became sick himself. The healer got sick, and Rabbi Hanina went to visit him. And he asked, do you want your suffering? Right? Is this suffering that's positive or negative? And he said, no, it's negative. Neither my suffering nor its reward. He said to him, give me your hand. He did so, and he raised him up to health. And it worked. Is this really so? So how could this story be true? Why couldn't Rabbi Yochanan raise himself up? If he's such a healer, Why doesn't he just heal himself? It is, as they say, a prisoner cannot free himself from jail. It's not about the spiritual power, it's about the interconnectivity. It's about the interdependence. It's about being part of the web of life. That does the healing, not the divinity or spirituality. It's the connection, person to person. And so therefore, right, it's imperative in the Jewish tradition, right, when you hear about getting someone sick, right, you connect. That's bikur cholim, right? And it helps, says our rabbinic tradition. But way does it help, right? We can discuss the psychological, emotional, spiritual, religious, but we believe it helps. And that's from the Talmud. Right? And when the other tradition, when someone is sick, is to recite a mishaberach for the cholim, a prayer for the healing. It's something we do in synagogue or at home. And here are the words: mishaberach avotenu, mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the one before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. Bless those in need of healing with a complete healing, the renewal of body and spirit, and we say Amen. Right? And so we sing this in shul, and we pray it from our homes. And does it work? Right? Does it work? Does the Mishaberach work? Well, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, in a pragmatic way, right? And so, but we pray anyway. So why do we pray? To let the person number one, to let the person know he's being prayed for. It feels good to know that you're being prayed for, that people care about you, that there's if there's any chance that it's going to help, we're going to do it, right? So it helps to be for the people themselves to know that they're being prayed for. It also helps the person who's praying. How so? Right? We feel stuck. We feel we can't do anything, right? We feel frustrated. It helps us release. It helps us emote, right? So there's some psychological, emotional benefit. And when we speak it in shul, when we say the name of someone who's sick in shul, it's also a notification to the community that someone among us is sick. So go visit them, right? So it's like an alarm bell. And so right, when you come to synagogue and say the name of someone who's sick out loud, other people, oh, really? I didn't know he's sick. And then perhaps they'll go visit, right? And so there you go. It brings more healing. And the final question is, does God hear it? Is there a spiritual cosmic connection? I'll leave that up to you. I believe there is. At the end of life, so that's when people who are sick, bikur cholim. So we'll go through kind of the phases of the end of life and figure out what the core essential Jewish moment, the Jewish essential midah, mitzvah of that moment. In American law and ideology, as expressed in the Declaration of Independence and reinforced by American constitutional law and rulings, we each own our bodies. We each own our own bodies. It's getting complicated these days. But we each own our own bodies, and short of harming someone else, we all inherit the liberty to do with our own bodies what we will. Right? So we can put on we can do anything we want. We can it's our own body to do as we want. I wish that were true in everywhere for women and men. But that's a different subject. But that's how it should be. Right? We in American law, we should be in charge of we are supposed to be, how about that, in charge of our own bodies. In sharp contrast, according to Judaism, God created, and therefore, right, according to Judaism, God created and therefore owns the entire universe. Everything belongs to God, including each person's body. And we therefore do not have the right unnecessarily to destroy or damage God's property. In fact, we have a fiduciary responsibility, a partnership responsibility to God to preserve our life and our health, right? We do everything we can to preserve life, right? Are you allowed to damage your own body? No, in Jewish law. Are you allowed to damage your own body in American law? Sure, there's nothing wrong with damaging your own body. Not true in Jewish law, right? And the key phrase here is unnecessarily, right? So if there's a reason, medical, emotional, psychological, right? If there are reasons, right, to mess with the body, then we do, right? We do to save a life, right? And in many other cases of emotional turmoil counts also, right? So psychological trauma to the woman, right, or to anyone, we're allowed to mess with our bodies. And so, right, but not unnecessarily, not frivolously, right? But we have to do so with great care when we mess with our bodies, right? And so that's right at the end of life. That's one of the things we have to deal with, is that there's a serious, major imperative to preserve life, to fight everything we can. Right. So therefore, it is forbidden to do anything which will hasten the death of one who is in the process of dying. You're supposed to leave the dying process alone. Let it go. Right. We're not supposed to hurry it along unnecessarily, which is the key word, right? Unless there's a reason to, right? However, if there is something external that is causing the delay in the exit of the soul, right? If the person is being sustained unnaturally, right, from the outside, if they're being right, if they're on the machines, if there's something external that is causing the delay in the exit of the soul, like for example, if they're, and this is back in the day, this is in the 1600s, right? We're not talking about modern medicine. For example, if nearby there's a sound of wood being chopped, or there is salt on his tongue, and these things delay the soul's leaving the body, it is permitted to remove these obstacles. Right? You see, you're allowed to remove the obstacles that are preventing the natural death. So that's allowed, that's permissible. What's not permissible is to do anything proactively, right, to hasten the death, unless absolutely necessary, in which case we do, right? So you have the issues that arise, which we won't have time to really unpack today, are life support, right? And the practical outcome here is, right, there are forms to fill out through the rabbinical assembly, if you want to do it in a Jewish way, about your intentions, your wishes at the end of life. And so there's medical directives. You can search it online if you'd like. It's a very interesting document from the conservative movement, from the rabbinical assembly, that has like a form that you fill out about your wishes for life support and at the end of your life. And it gives you a couple choices. You can be strict, with the halacha, or a little more lenient with the halacha, right? And so that's something to think about and to execute, right, as life goes on. Organ donation is encouraged in Judaism after the body dies, and so that's some people, right? Perhaps on a fundamentalist Hasidic, maybe not, but mainstream Judaism supports organ donation. Suicide and euthanasia is discouraged, right? And that seems unnecessary. If it's unnecessary, get help, right? Mental health. And so first we try to save. And after the body dies, we prefer not to mess with the body too much. And so autopsies are not recommended and not supported by Jewish law. However, right, if there's a reason and the medical authorities or legal authorities insist upon it, then we do our best and then we let the process happen. Why? Yes, Charles, yeah.
Yeah. About the autopsy, what I understand is that the reason why a lot of doctors were good in Spain or in France, whatever, is that we were allowed to do autopsy, whereas Christians cannot do autopsy.
Interesting, right.
And so all of the inside element, we knew how they were, how it worked. And so, if you go to Paris, for example, maybe not now, but 80% of the doctors are Jews.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because we had access to autopsies before the Christians. Very interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's a greater ethic involved, like scientific discovery, scientific advancement, then it becomes permissible. Right? We're not allowed to do it unnecessarily, but when there's a good enough reason, then we make the exception. And sounds like that was a good reason enough. Kvod hamet, or why don't we do autopsies? Well, we typically, because it's considered right. We take great care to honor the dead, to honor the corpse, right? And so it's not right. Even though the soul's not in the body anymore, the body itself is still holy, right? And so that differentiates us again a little bit from Christianity, right? In Christianity and in probably American spirituality, the soul is holy, but the body is evil, right? The body leads the soul astray, right? The body sins. Yeah, lusts and right, and so the body is sort of seen as unholy, mundane, and the soul is holy. But in Judaism, it's not. The soul is holy and the body is holy. Right? Both are holy, right? And that has a lot of ramification, both in legal tradition and in spiritual tradition. But when the soul leaves the body itself, the material, the physical presence that remains, is also holy and has to be treated with great care. Kvod hamet is what it's called, honoring the dead, right? And so cremation versus burial. That's why we prefer burial. It's perceived by the rabbis that the best way to honor the body is to put the material back where the material came from, right? That we're all made of the earth, and from dust we came, and from dust we return. And so that's seen as the most compassionate and honorable way to bury our loved ones. However, cremation is becoming more and more popular. Why? Cost, right? Finances. It's much less expensive, and it is too expensive to bury someone. It ought not be that expensive. So here we go. So the economy and the market creates that need for cremation. So financial is one aspect of it, but ecological, right? Some folks consider cremation to be more friendly to the earth than burial, and so that's a thing these days. And just spiritually, sometimes it feels better or worse for people. I think the tough part about the burial is laying the body into the ground, right? And because it seems like it's suffocating, or it's being disrespectful. Just the opposite, right? The soul's not in the body. The body doesn't breathe and respirate, and right. So it's a so in the Jewish perspective, it's a comfortable bed in which to rest eternally, right? But in the contemporary era, there are different metaphors that people have. The earth is dirty, right, or something, right? And so that's why I make sure to call it the earth and not dirt, right? So you don't put dirt on a coffin, you put earth on a coffin, right? So I'm trying to gently frame it in a Jewish experience that the earth is holy too, right? And so we don't call it dirt, we call it earth at funerals. That's what I picked up on early in my rabbinate. Never call it dirt, always call it earth. Right, and so cremation versus burial. The other issue with cremation, for some people who are connected to the Holocaust, right, is the ovens and the chambers, and it's seen as connected to the ovens of the Holocaust, and so that's a challenge for a lot of people, and a reason to stay with the tradition. And preparing the body after the body dies, there are a few things that we do because it's holy. One thing we do with shmirat haguf, shmira, which means we have shomrim. We're supposed to stay with the body and not leave it alone ever, to accompany the body. These days, right, the family, back in the day, the family used to do it, or family or friends. But today, the cemetery, the funeral home takes care of it, and they have shomrim. They have people that they hire to sit with the body to make sure that the body is never alone. And so I think there's that metaphysical, spiritual connection there, that we're imagining that there's still some sort of spirit left in the body until it goes down into the ground, until that final burial, that there's still some life inside the body in some way. That's kind of the metaphysical reason for the shomrim, for the guards of the body. But there's also, I think, back in the day, there was a practical reason, right? Because they didn't have refrigeration and fancy funeral homes, and so just wanted to protect the body, right, from anything that could happen to it. And so it's an important concept to stay with the body. The Chevra Kadisha, the holy Chevra, the holy fellowship, takes care of the body. It's their job, their volunteer job, to take care of the body. And what they do is wash the body, purify the body, and dress the body. And so there's a ritual cleansing of the body, a purification of the body, and then the body is dressed in white shrouds, and with special white shrouds that go back through the generations to our ancestry. So that's the preparation of the body. Yes.
Yeah, concerning the Chevra Kadisha, it seems to me that the people who do it, it's a volunteer thing, but are considered very, this is like a great mitzvah to participate in the Chevra Kadisha.
Yeah, and traditionally, historically, it's been sort of secret who's in the Chevra Kadisha, because I don't know why, but yeah, because of the holiness and the mystery of it, and the difficulty of it. I think it was just kept secret who's in the. So there's a lot of shrouded with mystery, and you're right. And you're not allowed to go see one. You're not allowed to be a spectator at a tahara. Yeah, you can. The only way you can go is if you're participating. It's considered dishonorable to the body for people to be watching, and so that's the reason that it's shrouded in mystery. Right at the beginning of my rabbinate, I figured maybe I'll go watch one or two. Right, and they said no, you're not allowed to. And so that's another way that the holiness is protected. And the way that people find out, by the way, is that the shrouds in the trunk. If you open someone's trunk, right, and you see shrouds in the trunk, but it means that they're part of the Chevra Kadisha. Right, they carry, because they're called in an instant. You get a phone call and you have to go run to the Chevra Kadisha, because it can happen at all hours of the night or day. And so you're on call 24/7 if you're part of the Chevra Kadisha. So it's a really interesting.
One of my grandfather was in Chevra Kadisha in Tunisia.
We have members of our congregation that are part of the Chevra Kadisha. We have several, but I can't tell you their names. I can't disclose the names. You have to find out. And that's how we prepare the body. And then when it's time for the funeral, here we are. The Kriya is somewhere in between. Kriya is the tearing of clothes, and it's a strong tradition. So where does it come from, and why is it in between? So the original Kriya, the original concept was when you first heard about someone who died, you would rend your clothes and cry, and it was part of the emotional response when you first heard of someone who died, a relative who died. You just tore your, and wherever you were, you tore your shirt and sat down on the ground. But right after some generations and generations and centuries, it's turned into sort of more of a ritual that we do, which is when we get to the funeral, the first thing that we do is tear Kriya. The first thing that we do is tear our clothing. Some folks aren't so comfortable tearing clothing anymore, so we provide a ribbon to put on your wardrobe, and then you tear your shirt, you can tear the ribbon right instead, to make it a little easier. But I decided to tear my shirt, and I think it just makes for a more meaningful experience. And so ribbons or clothing, right? And women sometimes do scarves, right, and things like that. So a lot of different options for Kriya. And then we begin the funeral service with Psalms. Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Right? And Psalms of comfort, God is still with me. Even though I'm down in this place, God is still with me. And so we recite Psalms and the El Malei Rachamim, which is our prayer, praying for the comfort of the soul. And so the question comes up, does Judaism believe in the afterlife? And the answer is yes, unequivocally. The answer is yes. We individuals may or may not believe in it, but Judaism does, right? And one of the ways we know that is we have all these traditions of honoring the soul. And so these traditions aren't just for the mourners, but also for the soul that survives after death, right? So the soul survives after death, and the El Mali Rachamim prays for that soul. May you be comfortable, may you be protected under the wings of the Shekhinah, right? And we're praying for the soul of the one who we love, right? And I say it in the present because that means that the love still exists, because love isn't physical, love is emotional. And so that still exists. All those emotions that once existed between person and person can still exist between person and soul to soul, right? Because the people who are alive have souls, and the people who have passed have souls, and there's still the possibility of soul to soul connection. And it's hard, and it happens in moments of elevation and spiritual elevation, or it just happens in memory. Right? Some people just call that memory, that whole soulful thing, and it means memory, and memory is real, and memory connects, and memory ties, and memory has neurons, and memory connects. Memory is real, right? And so that's another way to perceive what it means to have an afterlife. It means to have a strong memory connection. Right. So there's a lot of ways to define what it means to survive after the body dies, but definitively we do. Right? But there are liberal ways to think about it, and there are conservative ways to think about it. Charles, yeah.
Yeah. I think that memory is essential in Judaism at all levels. So, for example, in a museum, we have a big Zachor, and this is really implanted in our religion. It's not only after the Holocaust, it's all the time. And when somebody dies, we have a drash a month later, and then a year later. But memory, we always remember like the destruction of the temple, or so and so. It's a very normal
Yeah, that's right.
behavior. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, to define the soul as memory kind of makes sense in Judaism because memory is so essential to everything that we do. And I think one of the ramifications of memory, right, we are supposed to see ourselves as if we ourselves came out of Egypt, right? We time travel. Memory, if you do it right, if you do it intensely, that means you're sort of time traveling, which is God's space. God is beyond
Yeah.
time. Right?
Yeah. And also that we all were at when we got the Torah.
Yeah, and we all stood at Sinai. All of our were there, right? So we, it's hard to wrap our hand around what does that mean exactly. But collective memory, right? It means that we're connected. So yeah, so there are ways. So you don't have to believe in Saint Peter and the gates of heaven, right? Usually, oh no, there's no afterlife. How could that be, right? And right, there's no clouds or cupids or arrows. Or I know, that's not what afterlife is, right? Afterlife can be something else. Afterlife can be memory, right? Beautiful. And then the hesped is the eulogy that we recite at the funeral. Why do we do it, right? And it's a strange custom sometimes, right? And more and more, sometimes it can seem, if you don't do it well, it can seem inauthentic, right? That everybody's a tzaddik, right? So it's important to do it authentically, right? And meaningfully. But what the job is to figure out what their values were, right? How this person lived, what was important to them. And for my take on it is for us to learn what they did and pick up on some of the energy that's going to be missing in the world. So that's the purpose I do it for. Right? And I usually explain that. Let's remember what this person was like so that we can fill in, so that we can fill in the space that's now missing. So they were loving, they were kind, they were patient, right? And it's not everyone is that. Some people are impatient and they get a lot of stuff determined, So whatever they were, it's important to be true and real and appreciate all that they are. And so if we do that, that's an important part of what we do. And then it says shoveling, right? So we place a blanket of earth on top of our beloved, and so I usually say it. And it's called chesed shel emet, a kindness, a true kindness, a chesed shel emet, let me hold on a second. Maybe it's sort of like the one true chesed. It's something like that. And what does that mean? It means like it's the only act of kindness that you can do for someone that can never be repaid because they're gone, right? They can't repay you at this point. Every time else, right? There's some, maybe it's conditional, maybe it's, you're thinking about what you can get out of it, right? But in this case, it's totally pure, right? There's no question that this is just me loving on you. And that's why it's called a kindness, an eternal kindness, something like that. El Male Rachamim Shochein Bamromim, says the quote, El Male Rachamim Shochein Bamromim, in a minor soulful key. God, source of compassion, who dwells on high, may the soul of our loved one find shelter under your wings. Right? And the tricky part is to keep our minds in the metaphor. Right? It's usually we just go like, God doesn't have wings. I know, right? So what does it mean? Right? It means, right? What does it mean? So that's the challenge of adult education, right? Is okay, let's understand that these are metaphors. Now, what does it mean? And so let's do that for a second. Go ahead. God, source of compassion, dwells on high. The metaphor is that God is like a giant bird, right? Is that what this is? And wings, right? Or a giant angel or a bird-like thing in the heavens, and is hugging, finding shelter under your wings, right? So being nurtured, right? So what does that mean? It means comfortable and protected and nurtured. That's what we're praying for, right? So we have to go beyond the metaphor is the challenge, right? For our contemporary worship.
Yeah. Concerning that, the Yemenite, for example, when they were flown to Israel, they said, it's the bird that took us.
Right.
And it is in the in tradition.
Right, and it's
That's what you are saying,
it swoops in and saves us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the funeral, you enter the stages of grief start happening, right? And here are the stages of grief, and really they're laid out from the most intense, and then they lighten up and broaden out as you go along, as you go through time. So the first stage down there is aninut. Aninut is the space between the time between when someone dies and when they're buried. So that's your onen. You're during aninut, right? And so people are sometimes confused. Right? What do I do? The person just died. What am I supposed to do? The answer is you're in aninut. You're not supposed to do anything except take care of the arrangements, the logistics, right? So you just should be totally focused on taking care of the body, taking care of your loved ones, and getting ready for the funeral. So the mourning traditions do not start until the burial. So you're on this pause, which is called aninut. And then the burial happens, and immediately after the burial, Shiva begins. So in other words, if it's if someone is buried in the afternoon, the first day counts. The first day, even though it's only the afternoon, that's day one. Right? And then you start day two is the next day, right? And so including the first day, right? So it's really 6 days, right, of Shiva, if you think about it. So it's 6 nights of Aninut, and then Shiva is the first 7 days, and Shiva means 7. It's the number 7. So it's just the 7 means the 7 days of grief, right? And Shiva. Shloshim is the 30, right? And which means the 30 days of grief, the burial. And typically there's, right, in most traditions, we don't do it very well here in America, but in most places, the 30th day does become a ritual ceremony of note, which Charles just described. So more and more we're doing it a little bit, but the first 30 days, so the rituals lighten up, right? And for example, for men, you're not supposed to shave for the first 30 days. So you get up a little shloshim beard, and then at the 30th day, the tradition is that you're supposed to shave it off to have that sort of transition and out of Shloshim into the rest of the year. And in fact, we mourn for a whole year. So in the Talmud it says for those, right? So as I mentioned, all the rituals work on two levels, for the mourners and for the soul. And so the same is true for the year of mourning. We imagine that it takes the soul a year to get used to its new environment and to settle in. So we're imagining, as we're going through our mourning here and it's getting lighter, so too is our soul beginning to get more and more comfortable. And so it says that if you're a righteous person, then it takes 11 months before you're sort of feeling good up there. But for an evil person, for a Rasha, it takes 12 months to do it. And so the rabbis in their infinite wisdom decided, you know what? Everyone's 11 months. Let's have everyone be 11 months. Everyone's a tzaddik after they pass. Right? And so we do it for 11 months for everybody. That's how that developed. But what's interesting about that philosophy and that process is that one question is, do Jews believe in heaven and hell? Right? So how do we deal with heaven and hell? And do Jews believe in hell is one of the questions we have. And the answer is no, because hell is eternal damnation. Right? Hell is you're stuck there forever. Right? But in Judaism, the process the soul goes through is a painful process. If you did a lot of sinning in your life and all of a sudden you get exposed to ultimate reality, that's going to hurt. Right? And so it's a painful emotional experience, not physical, of course, emotional experience, right? Regretting what you've done, repenting for what you've done, right? Hurting for what you've done. But after 12 months, everything's okay. Then you go under the wings of God in peace and comfort, right? After the process, right? And if you lived a good life, then it's not very hard at all. You just sort of, oh, that was great, and you're comfortable very quickly up in Shamayim, up in the heavens, right? So that's where that philosophy comes from. Yeah.
In our tradition, we do the Askara also every year afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so there was Shloshim, and after the year of mourning is concluded, then every year, right? So I tell people, right, at the unveiling, sometimes we have the stone dedication after 11 months or around there. And then I say, this is the end of the mourning period, but it never goes away. Every year we revisit, all right, because we want to maintain that connection. And so, yes, so then we settle into our normal routine, which is yortzites and yizkers. So every Shalosh Regalim, every pilgrimage festival, and on Yom Kippur, we have a special yizker community remembrance. And then also on a personal level, right, on the anniversary of the death of a loved one, we also say Kaddish, light a candle, and have our yortzeit tradition that we read out in shul also. So as the Yizkor and the unveiling we talked about, the mourner's path is here, Shiva for 7 days, Shloshim for 30 days, and the period of Kaddish up to 11 months, right? And the yortzeit is a year after death and then keeps going after that. Here's the Aninut, right? It says no more than 72 hours, which means, right, the tradition is to bury our loved ones as soon as possible. In Israel, it goes real fast. And in other parts of the world, I think it goes real fast. In America, a day, 2 days, 3 days is stretching it. But no more than 72 hours. We want to make sure that people are, that the body doesn't linger too long.
If I may, there is an incident on the Shiva also. Like if someone dies on Friday and is buried in the afternoon, then you don't have to have Shiva anymore.
Right. So
you do it once and that's it.
Right. So before Chagim, before.
Right. Or exactly. Yeah. Right.
So there are time so let's talk about Shabbat, right? So it goes for a whole week. So what do you do on Shabbat? Right? What does the mourner do during Shiva? On Shabbat, comes to shul, and that's the tradition. The reason is that you don't do Shiva in the home on Shabbat. Why? Because community overrules our personal sadness. That community is so important that even when you're mourning your beloved, you should still come to shul on Shabbat, right, and be with community. And so, good. So what about Pesach and the Pesach Seder? Like, so if someone passes the week before Pesach, what do you do for Pesach, right? So you can't have a Shiva on Pesach. That doesn't quite work. And so the answer is it stops, right? When there's a festival, you only have Shiva for 2 days or 3 days, or right? And so that gets a little tricky because sometimes people want the Shiva. They want to, they need grief, right? And so typically what I'll do is, we'll wait till after the Yom Tov. And even though there's not a halachic responsibility for a Shiva in the home, you can still go to someone's house and daven, right? So we just, instead of having a formal Shiva, we just say it's a minyan or a minyan of comfort, right? But not a formal Shiva, right? And so we can still have the emotional benefit, even though we're not halachically mandated, right? So that's I play with it a little bit in order to enable a proper mourning grief experience. So Kaddish, right? We say Kaddish when you're mourning a loved one, and let's see if it has. Let's skip that for now. We'll come back to it. Jewish perspectives on the afterlife, right? Here we go. Here's from the Mishnah. The world is like an entrance hall before the world to come. Prepare in the entranceway so you can go into the great hall, right? So right there, you can see, not only do we believe in an afterlife, it's actually, a more grand experience, extravagant experience than is this world, right? And so do all you can now, right? Do all you can now. Prepare in the entranceway. That's the point, right? So what's the point of this? It's not really about the world to come. The point is prepare now. That's what the command is, right? That's what the imperative is. Prepare now, so that when we get to the great hall, we'll be happy and present. Religion, as is Rabbi Louis Jacobs, religion in its traditional form assures that God does not create to waste, and that no good deed is permanently lost, and that the individual soul which pursued goodness in this life will have it for his own and be godlike for all eternity. So when we connect with God in this world, right, we create a permanent relationship in the cosmos. God is the ocean and we are the waves. Right. So typically we talk about theology as above and below, and I'm guilty of that a lot because I don't know, right? I'm able to do that math in my head. Above and below doesn't mean vertically for me. It means beyond and here, right? However, there are other more liberal theologians who say, no, it's just one, right? And that's, Shema Yisrael, there's not a God in us. There's not a duality there. It's all one. So what does that mean? God is the ocean. God is all. God is all, right? Which is a Jewish mystical statement. God is all. God is this, right? God is all. And we are the waves. So God is the ocean and we're the waves. We're just part of God going this way and that way. In some sense, right? Each wave has its moment in which it is distinguishable as a somewhat separate entity, right? When it makes that big curl and say, oh, cool wave, right? Nevertheless, no wave is entirely distinct from the ocean. It's still ocean. It's God in different forms. God in this form, and this form, and this. So treat people well, because they too are a form of God. They are made in the image of God, right? And so it's a different, more intense way of thinking about being created in the image of God. Is we are created in God. This is all God, right? Tchiat HaMetim. In our prayers, we say, praised are you, Adonai, who resurrects the dead. Right, so let's talk a little bit about historical influences. So as most of us know, early Christianity was born out of Judaism. So what's the context of Christianity? Judaism is the host, the context for Christianity, right? So the early Christian theology came out of Judaism, right? It was a form of Judaism early on, right? Christian Jews, right? So they were, right? And so I'm mixing metaphors, but it's like they're Orthodox Jews, conservative Jews, Reformed Jews, Christian Jews, right? They're just like a denomination of Judaism, right? And that denomination really focused on the afterlife, right? And focused on resurrection and focused on the world to come, which are all Jewish concepts. But now we've deprioritized them and they've prioritized them, right? So they all come from the same milieu, is my point here. But what we've done with it is de-emphasized it, right? And we sort of took away its power. So when I pray, when I pray, thank you, God, for raising the dead, waking me up in the morning, giving life to the lifeless, energizing the world, right? That's how I go in my head, not actually, right? But even though there is a concept in Judaism of resurrection, right? And so here's where one place it comes. Some people want to be buried in Israel on the Mount of Olives. So why is that such a popular cemetery? Charles, do you know why it's a popular cemetery? It's a popular cemetery because when Messiah comes, the tradition is the Jews are going to end up on Mount Zion, and we're all going to end up there. How are we going to get there? Right, we're all going to roll in our grave. Our corpses are going to roll to Mount Zion, to the Mount of Olives. I remember learning about that growing up in modern Orthodox day school. And that's one of the reasons we need to be buried whole. We need to be buried, our bodies have to be buried whole because one day they're going to grow back and go to Israel. So there is that resurrection concept in Judaism fairly strongly, but these days we really de-emphasize it. And another way we deal with the afterlife is called Gilgul Haneshamot, which is reincarnation, right? So Buddhism went all in with reincarnation, right? But there are minority sects in Judaism that, right, mystical folks who believe that we are all reincarnated. We come back a second time, a third time to try to get it right, and we're just like in the movies, right? And so we get our souls get planted in a different body. And we have to do a tikkun, and because we have to fix something that we did wrong, to fix something, right? Fix something until we're ready and perfected our souls, and we can move on to the next world, right? And so one more sort of concept about life and death, right? So the soul exists before we're born, and then exists after we die, right? This is the span of our lives. Right, and the soul existed before, and it's going to exist after, is the Jewish theology. How so? Right, so before a baby is born, here's what happens in our Jewish lore. God calls out the name, or an angel calls out the name. Hey, Yitzhak, time to get born, and then the soul comes down, and as soon as the baby takes its first breath of air, the soul gets implanted into the body. So the soul, was really with God, and so it's a mature soul in the body. So what happens? An angel comes and says, "Shh, forget everything." And for that reason, we have a little cleft on top of our palate because the angel came up to us and said, "Shh, forget everything you know. We're starting from scratch, being planted into this body." Right? And so we imagine that there's a storehouse of souls. And then, right, when it's time, goes through life's journey, and then when the body dies, it returns back to that storehouse of souls. Right? And so that's the major Jewish lore when it comes to, right, life and death. And it helps us understand, A, that we believe in an afterlife, that the soul survives, and B, gives us a concept of what our job is here. And our job is to start from scratch and do some beautiful things so that when we get back to the world of the spirit, we feel good about what we've done. And let's end here. Beautiful additional readings, right? There's lots written about the Jewish way of death and mourning. There's some classics are Eli Spitz, Does the Soul Survive? So he does a really nice job collecting all the mystical sources and making it easy to read and understand, and sort of creates a narrative for life and death in Judaism. The title is, Does the Soul Survive? The answer is yes, it does. And then he shows you how, he brings you through the texts. Matters in Life and Death, Rabbi Elliot Dorff is our master in the conservative movement, master of ethics. He knows all the Jewish sources, he knows all the secular sources. He's been to Washington, D.C., he sat on medical ethics boards. And so if you want to know about what Judaism says about life and death, I would recommend Elliot Dorff. And there are a few others here too. Anita Diamond that has a more therapeutic spiritual approach. Good. So that's a sense of bereavement and death and end of life in Judaism. We take great care of the body. We take great care of the mourner. One last Talmudic image is, they say that the question is, does it hurt? Does it hurt to die? They discuss in the Talmud, because we imagine it's going to be bad, or we're afraid of something or anxious, and the answer is, it's like taking a piece of hair out of a cup of milk. So it's gentle, and so that would be a blessing, and so may we do all we can in this world to prepare ourselves for the world to come. Thank you for joining. I'll see you Wednesday. Yes, sure, Charles.
May I make a comment about something you said that I think is extremely important? When we talked about all the Jews were there at the receipt of the Torah, or the modern psychology, say after Sigmund Freud, and they are coming up with collective unconscious. Like when you are born, you are bringing in, your father, your grandfather, and I think that's a big, that's.
In some sense, in a neurological or psychological sense, it's true that we time travel, that we connect with people who are no longer here all the time, right? In our wiring and in our DNA. That's true.
Rabbi, is this
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just asking, is this coming Wednesday, the last?
It is, yeah. So I'll summarize.
What did we cover on Wednesday?
There's a final class, and then we did Israel. Is that right? I don't know why I forgot about if we did Israel or not. Does that ring a bell, Gail, for you?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think there's just one kind of final class about the purpose of Judaism and the big picture ideas. I think I have that right. Yep. All right. I'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.